Homeless at 22, no family, no place left to go. All Eliza Foster had was a forgotten building. Nobody wanted an abandoned post office sitting at the edge of a dying town. People said the abandoned post office was cursed. They whispered about missing letters, hidden records, and strange disappearances connected to the building decades ago. But what nobody knew was that this abandoned post office was hiding a secret buried for over 20 years. A secret tied to Eliza's missing mother and her own stolen past. And the moment she opened the hidden room beneath the floorboards, everything began to unravel. Before we continue, if stories like this stay with you, make sure to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. At 22 years old, Eliza Foster had already learned what it felt like to be forgotten. After aging out of the foster care system, she drifted from shelter to shelter across rural Montana, carrying everything she owned in 2 torn duffel bags and sleeping most nights inside a rusted pickup truck that barely started in the cold. She worked wherever she could, cleaning diner floors after midnight, unloading grocery shipments before dawn, but no matter how hard she fought, life kept pushing her backward. Then winter came early. The diner closed, the shelter filled up, and Eliza was left with just $214 to her name. Most people would have spent it on food, gas, or another temporary place to sleep. Instead, Eliza bought an abandoned post office no one wanted. The building sat at the edge of Maple Creek, a dying town people passed without noticing. Its windows were shattered, the roof sagged dangerously, and faded warning signs still clung to the walls like ghosts from another time. Locals called it cursed. They whispered about missing mail, strange disappearances, and secrets buried somewhere beneath the building decades ago. But when Eliza stepped inside for the first time, something deep in her chest stirred. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible anymore. The first night inside the abandoned post office was colder than Eliza Foster expected. Wind slipped through the broken windows in long, whispering drafts, rattling loose ceiling panels above her head. She had pushed an old sorting table against the front door for safety, wrapped herself in 2 thrift store blankets, and tried to convince herself this place could become home. But sleep never really came. Every sound felt wrong. The creaking pipes, the scratching inside the walls, the faint metallic clanging somewhere deep beneath the floorboards. At around 2:13, Eliza's eyes snapped open. There it was again. Clang! A sharp sound, not from outside. From underneath her. She sat up instantly, heart pounding. For a few seconds, she told herself it was old plumbing, maybe the building settling in the cold. Then the sound came again, closer this time. Clang, scrape, like metal dragging slowly across concrete. Eliza grabbed the flashlight beside her backpack and stood carefully. The beam shook slightly in her trembling hand as she scanned the dark lobby of the post office. Dust floated through the air like ash. Everything looked abandoned. Dead. But then she noticed something strange near the old mail sorting counter. The floor beneath it looked cleaner. Not clean exactly, just less dusty. Like it had been disturbed. A knot tightened in her stomach. Okay, either I'm losing my mind, she whispered nervously, or someone's been down here. Slowly, she pushed the heavy sorting counter aside. Wood groaned against the floor, and underneath it was a door. A narrow metal hatch hidden beneath decades of dirt and forgotten mailbags. Eliza froze. Her pulse quickened instantly. Why would an old post office need a hidden floor hatch? She knelt down, wiping away layers of grime until faded letters became visible on the rusted surface. Authorized personnel only. A chill ran through her body. The hatch had no lock, just a thick iron handle. For a moment, Every survival instinct screamed at her to stop. This building already felt wrong enough. Opening hidden doors in abandoned places was exactly how people disappeared in horror movies. But then she remembered sleeping in her truck during snowstorms, remembered being invisible her entire life. And suddenly, fear didn't feel stronger than curiosity anymore. Taking a slow breath, Eliza gripped the handle and pulled. The hatch resisted at first. Then suddenly, screech. The metal door groaned open, releasing a wave of stale, freezing air from below. The smell hit her instantly. Dust, mold, old paper, and something else. Something strangely metallic. Her flashlight revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Deep darkness. Eliza swallowed hard. Nope, she muttered immediately. Absolutely not. But she didn't walk away. Instead, against all logic, she stepped down, one stair at a time. The wood creaked beneath her boots as the light from upstairs slowly disappeared behind her. The deeper she went, the colder the air became. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself standing inside a massive underground archive room. Her breath caught instantly. Rows, endless rows. Metal shelves stretched across the room, stacked with thousands of dusty mailbags, sealed boxes, and bundled letters tied together with faded string. It looked like time had stopped decades ago. "What is this place?" Eliza whispered. She moved slowly between the shelves, flashlight gliding across old labels and dates. None of these deliveries had ever been completed. Everywhere she looked, there were unopened letters, forgotten packages, lives frozen in paper. Suddenly, thud, Eliza spun around violently. Her flashlight beam darted across the darkness. Nothing, but her breathing became shallow. Someone else was down here. She could feel it. "Hello," she called cautiously. No answer. Only silence. Then, a faint buzzing sound crackled overhead. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the entire underground room lit up. Eliza gasped. Rows of ancient fluorescent lights hummed weakly to life above her, bathing the hidden archive in pale yellow light. That's impossible. This place still had electricity. After all these years. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest as she looked around more carefully now. This wasn't random storage. This place had been organized deliberately, hidden deliberately. Then she saw it. At the very end of the room stood a small office enclosed behind cloudy glass walls. Unlike everything else underground, that room looked untouched, perfectly preserved. Eliza moved toward it slowly. The office door creaked open with the slightest push. Inside sat a desk covered in neatly stacked files, an old tape recorder, a wall clock permanently frozen at 11:47, and on the desk, a single envelope, clean, untouched by dust, as if someone had placed it there recently. Her stomach tightened. Written across the front in faded black ink were 2 words. "To the girl who finds this." Eliza's breath stopped. Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. This can't be real. Inside was a letter. Old, fragile, handwritten. She unfolded it carefully. The first line made her entire body go cold. "If you are reading this, it means the post office has finally chosen someone." Eliza stared at the page, frozen. Chosen. Her eyes moved lower. For years, this place protected letters that powerful people wanted erased. Some contained confessions. Some exposed corruption. Some carried truths that could destroy lives. A sudden pressure tightened in her chest. She kept reading faster. "We hid everything underground after the fire in 1974. Officially, the building was abandoned. Unofficially, we were silenced. Eliza's pulse raced harder now. This wasn't just forgotten mail. This was something dangerous. Then her eyes reached the final paragraph, and her entire world shifted. There is one final delivery that must be completed. Beneath the sentence was a name. Her name, Eliza Foster. She stumbled backward instantly. No, that's impossible. Her hands shook violently now, because underneath her name was a date, written over 20 years ago, before she was even born, and taped to the back of the letter was an old photograph. A young woman holding a newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. The woman was smiling through tears, and written carefully across the bottom corner were the words, "My daughter, Eliza." The flashlight slipped from Eliza's hand and hit the floor with a loud crack. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. All her life, she believed she had been abandoned, forgotten, thrown away. But now, standing inside a hidden room beneath an abandoned post office no one wanted, she realized something terrifying. Someone had been hiding the truth about her entire life. Eliza Foster couldn't move. The underground office felt suddenly smaller, colder, suffocating. Her eyes remained locked on the photograph, trembling in her hands. The woman in the picture looked young, exhausted, tearful, but there was something unmistakably familiar about her. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, even the tiny scar near her eyebrow. Eliza had seen that scar before, in the mirror. "No," she whispered weakly, "this isn't real." All her life, she had been told the same story. Your mother abandoned you. No details, no explanation, no chance to ask questions. Just a single sentence repeated so many times it eventually became truth. But now, that truth was collapsing. Her breathing became uneven as she unfolded another paper hidden beneath the photograph. It was a hospital document. Birth records. Her birth records. The date matched exactly. Mother's name, Margaret Foster. Status child removed prior to release. Eliza's chest tightened painfully. Removed, not abandoned. Removed. A sudden ringing filled her ears. Everything she believed about herself began unraveling all at once. Then, thump. A loud noise echoed somewhere beyond the underground archive room. Eliza jumped violently. The papers slipped from her hands. Silence followed. But it wasn't empty silence anymore. Someone was upstairs. Her heartbeat exploded into panic. Slowly, she grabbed the flashlight from the floor and turned toward the dark hallway outside the office. Another sound. Creak. Floorboards. Directly above her, every instinct screamed at her to stay quiet. The post office was supposed to be abandoned. No one should have been there. Then she heard something worse. A voice. Muffled, distant. Male. "She's here." Eliza froze solid. Her blood ran cold instantly. How could anyone know she was there? Another voice answered. "Find the archive room." Archive room. They knew about it. Panic crashed through her chest. She backed away slowly, flashlight shaking in her hand. The old office suddenly didn't feel like a discovery anymore. It felt like a trap. Then, the underground lights flickered. Once, twice, and suddenly, everything went dark. The entire archive vanished into blackness. Eliza gasped sharply. Her flashlight beam became the only light left. Above her, footsteps moved faster now. Heavy, intentional. They opened the lower hatch, one voice said sharply. Then she found it. A terrifying realization hit Eliza instantly. These people weren't random trespassers. They came here for the hidden room, for the letters, and now they knew she had seen them. Fear surged through her body so violently she nearly dropped the flashlight again. Think. Her eyes darted around the darkness desperately until she spotted another doorway near the back of the archive, half hidden behind collapsed shelves. Without hesitation, Eliza grabbed the photograph and the letter addressed to her, stuffed them into her backpack, and ran. The underground room seemed endless as she rushed through narrow aisles lined with forgotten mailbags. Dust exploded beneath her boots while somewhere behind her, a metal door slammed open upstairs. There below, flashlight suddenly cut through the darkness behind her. Eliza's pulse nearly stopped. They were coming down. Fast. She pushed harder, squeezing through fallen shelves toward the narrow doorway at the back. The opening led into a cramped maintenance tunnel barely wide enough to crawl through. Rust-covered pipes lined the walls. The air smelled damp and metallic. But she had no choice. Behind her, voices echoed louder now. "I see her light." Eliza dropped to her knees and crawled into the tunnel just as flashlight beams swept across the archive behind her. Her breathing became ragged. The tunnel was suffocatingly tight. Every movement scraped her elbows against rough concrete. Somewhere behind her, angry footsteps thundered through the archive room. Then a voice shouted, "Don't let her leave with anything." Fear transformed into adrenaline. Eliza crawled faster. The tunnel sloped upward slightly, twisting through darkness like something buried and forgotten decades ago. Suddenly, her hand touched wood. A door, old and swollen from moisture. She shoved against it desperately. First it wouldn't move. Then, crack! Cold night air rushed in. Eliza stumbled out behind the abandoned post office, collapsing into frozen weeds behind the building. For one brief second, she thought she escaped. Then she heard shouting behind her. "She's outside." Her heart nearly exploded. Without looking back, Eliza ran. Across the empty road, past abandoned storefronts, into the freezing darkness of Maple Creek. Snow crunched beneath her boots while icy wind tore through her thin jacket. Behind her, headlights suddenly flashed on. A truck engine roared to life near the post office. "They're following me," she gasped. Terror flooded every nerve in her body. She didn't even know who these people were. But she knew one thing. They were willing to hunt her down over those letters. Which meant the truth hidden underground was far bigger than she imagined. Eliza sprinted between dark buildings, lungs burning painfully. Her backpack slammed against her shoulders with every step. Inside it were the only things connecting her to the truth about her mother. And somebody wanted them back. Suddenly, a blinding flashlight beam swept across her face. There she is. The truck turned sharply onto the road beside her. Eliza darted into a narrow alley behind an abandoned grocery store, nearly slipping on ice. The beam followed. Footsteps pounded behind her now. Close. Too close. Her chest tightened with panic as she reached the end of the alley. And stopped. Dead end. A chain-link fence blocked her path. No, no, no. Voices closed in behind her. Eliza spun around wildly. 3 figures emerged from the darkness wearing heavy winter coats. Their faces remained hidden beneath hats and shadows. One stepped forward slowly. "You shouldn't have opened that room," he said calmly. Eliza backed against the fence, shaking uncontrollably. "Who are you people?" she demanded. The man ignored the question. "Give us the letters." "No." Her answer surprised even herself. The man sighed heavily. "You don't understand what you found." "Then explain it." Another silence. Then the second man finally spoke. Your mother worked here." Eliza's breath caught instantly. She discovered something hidden in the mail system. Evidence, names, payments. Powerful people using this post office to bury information for decades. Her mind raced. Corruption, cover-ups, hidden mail. Suddenly, the underground archive made horrifying sense. They silenced everyone involved. The man continued quietly, including her. Eliza's voice cracked. "What happened to my mother?" The three figures exchanged uneasy glances, and for the first time, the men didn't look threatening. They looked afraid. Then the first man spoke softly. "She disappeared the same night the post office burned down." The world tilted beneath Eliza's feet. "No. We tried to protect the letters after that," he continued. "We hid everything underground waiting for the right person to find it." Eliza's breathing slowed. Confusion replaced panic. "You're not trying to stop me." The older man shook his head slowly. "We're trying to stop the people who are still looking for what your mother uncovered." A terrifying silence followed. Then, far down the road, another pair of headlights appeared. A different vehicle. Moving fast toward town, the men immediately turned pale. One whispered, "They found her." The older man looked directly into Eliza's eyes, and his next words changed everything. "If they discover you're Margaret Foster's daughter," he paused, "they will never let you leave Maple Creek alive." Eliza Foster stood frozen in the alley, staring at the approaching headlights in the distance. The cold wind no longer bothered her. Neither did the fear, because something inside her had shifted the moment she heard her mother's name spoken out loud by someone other than herself. Margaret Foster. For years, that name meant nothing more than absence. A ghost. A wound. A question nobody would answer. But now, it felt real. Painfully real. The older man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to come with us, right now." Eliza tightened her grip on her backpack instinctively. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," he admitted. "But if the people in that car find you first, none of this will matter." The headlights grew brighter. Closer. Panic flickered across the faces of the three strangers. Finally, Eliza nodded once. "Fine." Without another word, they hurried her through a narrow passage between buildings and into the back entrance of an old hardware store that had clearly been abandoned for years. Inside, dust coated everything. Broken shelves leaned against cracked walls. But hidden beneath the floorboards in the storage room was another concealed space, small, cramped, but warm enough to shield them from the freezing night outside. The older man lit a lantern. Soft golden light filled the room. For the first time, Eliza saw his face clearly. He looked exhausted. Older than she first thought. His gray beard was uneven, his eyes heavy with years of guilt. "My name is Walter Green," he said quietly. The name meant nothing to Eliza, but the emotion behind it did. "I worked at the post office with your mother." Her chest tightened instantly. Walter reached into his coat and carefully pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Eliza's breath caught. It was a silver necklace. Simple, worn with age, but she recognized it immediately. In the photograph underground, her mother had been wearing it. "She left this behind the night she disappeared," Walter said softly. "She told me if anything ever happened to her, I was supposed to protect the truth." Eliza stared at the necklace in silence. Then finally, "What truth?" The room grew quiet. Even the others seemed uneasy now. Walter exhaled slowly before answering. The Maple Creek post office wasn't just handling mail. He paused. It was being used to hide evidence. Eliza frowned. What kind of evidence? Money laundering, illegal land deals, political bribes, missing records. For decades, powerful people used isolated towns like this to move documents without attracting attention. Her stomach dropped. The underground archive, she whispered. Walter nodded. Your mother discovered shipments that were never supposed to exist. Letters intercepted before delivery. Financial records connected to people with influence far beyond this town. Eliza's mind raced. This wasn't just corruption. This was organized, calculated. And when she tried to expose it, Eliza asked carefully. Walter's expression darkened. The fire happened. A chill spread through her body. Officially, the post office fire had been ruled accidental. But now, nothing about this felt accidental anymore. She knew they were watching her. Walter continued quietly. That's why she hid the letters underground. She believed someday someone honest would find them. His eyes met Eliza's. She never expected that person to be her daughter. Silence filled the room again. Heavy silence. Eliza looked down at the necklace trembling in her hands. All her life, she believed she came from nothing. No family, no purpose, no place in the world. But now the truth felt almost unbearable. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had been trying to protect her. A painful knot tightened in Eliza's throat. She looked for me, she whispered weakly. Walter nodded slowly. For years. Tears burned behind Eliza's eyes instantly. Every lonely birthday. Every night spent wondering why nobody wanted her. Every moment she blamed herself for being unwanted. All of it had been built on a lie. And suddenly, the abandoned post office didn't feel cursed anymore. It felt stolen. Her mother's story had been stolen. The truth had been buried. And Eliza herself had spent her entire life running from a pain that was never truly hers to carry. Something inside her hardened. Not anger exactly. Something deeper. Understanding. For the first time since arriving in Maple Creek, she stopped seeing herself as a victim of bad luck. Maybe she had been led here. Not by coincidence, but by unfinished truth. Walter carefully slid a small box across the table toward her. Inside were dozens of old cassette tapes labeled in faded handwriting. M. Foster. Eliza stared at them. What are these? Your mother recorded everything she discovered, Walter said quietly. Names, transactions, confessions. Eliza looked up sharply. You kept all this hidden for 20 years. We had to. One of the other men finally spoke. People died trying to expose it. A heavy silence followed. Then, a loud engine roared outside the building. Everyone froze instantly. Headlights swept across the dusty windows above them. Walter cursed under his breath. They're searching the town already. Fear surged again. But this time, Eliza didn't feel helpless. She felt angry. All these years, powerful people buried the truth and destroyed lives to protect themselves. Her mother tried to stop them and paid for it. Eliza slowly closed the box of tapes. Then she looked up. What happens if we release everything? The room fell completely silent. Walter studied her carefully. Finally, he answered. If the truth comes out, people far beyond Maple Creek will fall. Eliza glanced down at the necklace once more. Her mother had tried to fight alone. Maybe that was why she disappeared. But Eliza wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of being forgotten. Because now she understood something powerful. The abandoned post office wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of the truth her mother died trying to protect. And Eliza Foster had no intention of burying it again. Eliza Foster didn't leave Maple Creek. Even after learning the truth about her mother, even after discovering the hidden archive beneath the abandoned post office, she stayed, because for the first time in her life, she finally understood something important. She wasn't lost anymore. She had a purpose. The next morning, snow covered the empty streets of town like silence frozen in time. Inside the hidden room beneath the hardware store, Eliza sat alone beside stacks of unopened letters spread across the floor. Thousands of lives, thousands of stories, all buried underground for decades. Some letters were stained with age, others still sealed perfectly shut. She picked one up carefully. A letter from a soldier stationed overseas in 1987. Another from a father apologizing to his daughter after years of absence. One was a wedding invitation that had never arrived. Another contained divorce papers that changed an entire family's future without anyone knowing why. Every envelope felt heavy. Not because of paper, but because of time. Walter watched quietly from across the room. "You understand now why your mother protected these?" he asked softly. Eliza nodded slowly. "These aren't just letters," she whispered. "They're unfinished lives." The words lingered in the air, and suddenly, an idea began forming inside her mind. A dangerous one, but powerful. "What if we deliver them?" she asked. Walter blinked. "What?" "The letters," Eliza said, standing now. "What if we find the people they were meant for?" The room fell silent instantly. One of the men gave a nervous laugh. "Eliza, some of these are over 40 years old." "I know. Most of those people are probably gone." "Not all of them." Walter studied her carefully. "You really think opening old wounds is a good idea?" Eliza looked down at the photograph of her mother still resting beside her backpack. "My whole life changed because of one hidden letter," she said quietly. "Maybe someone else deserves the truth too." Nobody answered. But nobody argued either. That same day, Eliza returned to the abandoned post office. For the first time since arriving there, the building no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. Dust drifted through beams of pale winter sunlight as she cleaned the front lobby for hours, dragging out broken furniture, sweeping shattered glass, and clearing decades of neglect from the floor. By evening, exhaustion burned through every muscle in her body. But she smiled anyway, because she had an idea bigger than survival now. Over the next few days, Eliza transformed the abandoned post office piece by piece. The cracked front desk became a sorting station. Old mail shelves were repaired. Boxes of forgotten letters were organized by year and state. She even painted a new sign above the entrance by hand. The Second Chance Post Office. People laughed at first. Locals drove past, shaking their heads. The homeless girl finally lost her mind. She's reopening a dead post office. No one even sends letters anymore. But Eliza ignored them. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't about mail. It was about closure. The first breakthrough happened 3 days later. Eliza found an unopened letter addressed to a woman named Eleanor Hayes living only 2 towns away. The envelope was dated 1994. Inside was a handwritten confession from Eleanor's younger brother, the same brother who disappeared after stealing money from their family business decades earlier. He explained everything: the debt, the shame, why he ran away. And at the bottom of the letter, "I never stopped loving you." Eliza drove 2 hours through snow just to deliver it. When Eleanor opened the envelope with trembling hands, she burst into tears before finishing the first page. For over 30 years, she believed her brother abandoned the family without regret. Now she knew the truth. As Eliza quietly turned to leave, Eleanor grabbed her arm. "Where did you find this?" Eliza hesitated, then softly answered, in a place where forgotten things were waiting to be found. By the end of the week, word spread, slowly at first, then everywhere. The abandoned post office was delivering lost letters. Families reunited. Questions answered. Old wounds reopened, but finally healed. Journalists began calling. Local news stations arrived with cameras. People lined up outside the building carrying old photographs and faded addresses, hoping Eliza might uncover something connected to their past. For the first time in years, Maple Creek had life again. And at the center of it all was Eliza Foster, the orphan girl nobody noticed, the homeless girl people pitied. Now, standing behind the front desk of the same abandoned post office everyone feared. But the biggest change wasn't happening around her. It was happening inside her. Every letter she delivered healed something in others. And somehow, it healed pieces of her, too. For the first time in her life, people looked at her differently. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with gratitude, respect, hope. One snowy evening, after finishing another stack of deliveries, Eliza sat alone behind the counter listening to the soft hum of an old space heater. The building felt warm now, safe, like home. Her eyes drifted toward the hidden archive door beneath the floorboards. Thousands of letters still remained unopened. Thousands of secrets still buried. But among them, somewhere, was the full truth about what happened to her mother. And Eliza knew something now that terrified her. The more attention the post office received, the more dangerous this would become. Because if the wrong people realized those hidden letters were resurfacing, they would come back. And this time, they wouldn't just try to silence the truth. They would try to silence her. The abandoned post office was no longer empty. Every morning, people gathered outside before sunrise, holding old photographs, faded envelopes, and decades of unanswered questions. Cars lined the snowy streets of Maple Creek. Reporters came from neighboring counties. Some visitors cried before they even stepped through the door. And somehow, at the center of it all was Eliza Foster. The girl who once slept inside a broken truck now stood behind the front counter wearing a borrowed winter coat and sorting through lost pieces of people's lives. But attention came with consequences. 3 weeks after reopening the building, strange things began happening. At first, they were small. A filing cabinet left open overnight. Boxes moved from their original places. Footprints appearing behind the post office after midnight. Then, one evening, Eliza returned from a delivery and froze the moment she stepped inside. The lights were off. The front door was unlocked, and the entire sorting room had been torn apart. Letters covered the floor like snow. Drawers had been emptied, shelves overturned, files ripped open violently. Her chest tightened with panic. No, no, no. She rushed toward the hidden hatch beneath the sorting counter, still closed, barely breathing. She opened it and descended into the underground archive room. The moment her flashlight swept across the darkness, her blood ran cold. Someone had been there. Entire shelves were missing. Dozens of boxes gone. And written across one of the archive walls in thick black spray paint were 4 chilling words. Stop digging for the dead. Eliza stumbled backward. Fear clawed through her chest. They found the archive. Walter arrived minutes later after her frantic phone call, the moment he saw the message on the wall. His face turned pale. They know exactly what's down here now, he whispered. Eliza turned toward him sharply. Who are these people? Walter hesitated. Too long. And suddenly, Eliza noticed something she hadn't before. Guilt. Real guilt. You know more than you've told me, she said quietly. Walter avoided her eyes. Walter. Still silence. Then finally, "There's something your mother never found out before she disappeared." The room suddenly felt heavier. "What are you talking about?" Walter looked devastated. Margaret thought powerful businessmen were using the post office to hide evidence. She was right. She was only partly right. Eliza frowned. Walter swallowed hard. The operation wasn't being run by outsiders. A long pause. It was being run by people inside Maple Creek. Eliza stared at him. "No." Walter's voice cracked slightly. "The mayor, the sheriff, business owners, even federal contacts. This town wasn't just hiding mail." He looked directly at her now. It was laundering information. A painful silence filled the archive. Suddenly, every strange look from locals, every warning, every secretive conversation made sense. The town itself had protected the lie for decades. "But my mother," Eliza whispered. "What did she actually discover?" Walter slowly reached into his coat pocket. Then he placed a small cassette tape onto the table. Eliza stared at it. Written across the label in faded handwriting were the words, "Margaret Foster, final recording." Her pulse stopped. "You had this the whole time." Walter nodded weakly. "She gave it to me the night before the fire." "Why didn't you show me sooner?" "Because if anyone hears what's on that tape," he said quietly, "everything changes." Eliza grabbed the cassette instantly. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. "What's on it?" Walter looked away. The names. The air left her lungs. Not rumors. Not theories. Proof. The room suddenly felt terrifyingly small. Eliza slowly turned toward the old tape recorder sitting in the archive office. Dust coated its surface, but it still worked. Walter stepped forward quickly. "Eliza, wait." Click. The tape began spinning. Static filled the room. Then, a woman's voice emerged softly through the speakers. Tired, breathing unevenly, but unmistakably emotional. "If anyone finds this recording..." Eliza froze instantly. It was her mother. For the first time in her life, she was hearing her voice. Tears flooded Eliza's eyes before she could stop them. "My name is Margaret Foster," the recording continued, "and if this tape is playing, then I may already be gone." Walter lowered his head silently. "I uncovered financial records connected to officials inside Maple Creek. Missing federal documents, blackmail payments, illegal property seizures." The tape crackled. Then Margaret's voice lowered. But the most dangerous discovery wasn't the money. Eliza's heartbeat pounded violently now. It was the children. The room went dead silent. Eliza blinked in confusion. Children. They used the foster care system to erase identities. Margaret continued shakily. Children disappeared from records. Names changed. Files destroyed. Eliza stopped breathing. "No. I believe some of these children were intentionally separated from their families to protect powerful people connected to the operation." Her entire body went numb. Then, the tape crackled again, and Margaret whispered the words that shattered everything. "My daughter may already be one of them." Eliza staggered backward like she'd been hit. The world around her blurred instantly. Not abandoned. Not orphaned. Taken. Walter looked devastated. "We never knew if she was right." Eliza's voice broke violently. "You think they took me?" Nobody answered. And somehow, that silence was worse. Then suddenly, bang, a massive crash exploded upstairs. Everyone jumped. Another crash followed. The front doors of the post office. Someone was breaking in. Walter's face drained of color instantly. They found the tape. Heavy footsteps thundered above them. Voices shouted, Furniture overturned violently. Eliza's heart raced out of control as Walter grabbed her shoulders. "You need to run, right now." But Eliza didn't move, because something inside her had changed forever. All her life, she believed she was unwanted. Now she realized something terrifying. She hadn't been forgotten. She had been hidden, and whoever buried the truth for 20 years had finally come back to finish what they started. The pounding upstairs grew louder. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Heavy footsteps stormed through the abandoned post office like a force determined to destroy everything in its path. But Eliza Foster no longer felt the same fear that once controlled her, because now she knew the truth. Her entire life had been built on a lie. She wasn't abandoned. She wasn't unwanted. She was stolen. And suddenly, every lonely night, every unanswered question, every moment she wondered why nobody came back for her, burned inside her chest like fire. Walter grabbed her arm urgently. "Eliza, we have to go." But she stood frozen beside the tape recorder, tears slipping silently down her face as her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "My daughter may already be one of them." For years, Eliza believed she was invisible to the world. Now she realized something heartbreaking. Someone had worked very hard to make sure she disappeared. The footsteps above them spread across the building. Drawers slammed, furniture crashed. "They're searching the archive," one voice shouted. Walter's panic intensified. If they find those tapes, it's over. But Eliza slowly wiped her tears away. "No," she whispered. Walter looked at her in shock. "Eliza, they spent 20 years burying people's lives," she said, her voice trembling but stronger now. "I'm done running from them." Something in her eyes changed. Not fear, resolve. For the first time in her life, Eliza Foster stopped feeling like a victim of tragedy and started becoming someone willing to fight back. Quickly, she grabbed the remaining cassette tapes and stuffed them into a canvas mailbag while Walter led the others through a narrow maintenance tunnel beneath the archive. The hidden passage stretched beneath Maple Creek like veins buried underground. Cold air rushed through rusted vents overhead while distant voices echoed behind them. "They're below somewhere." Flashlights flickered at the far end of the tunnel. They were close. Too close. Eliza's lungs burned as they ran through darkness. But she refused to stop. Not now. Not after finally discovering who she really was. The tunnel eventually opened behind the old church near the edge of town. Snow fell heavily now, blanketing Maple Creek in white silence. Walter leaned against the wall, exhausted. "We can leave tonight," he said breathlessly. "Disappear before they find us." But Eliza stared back toward the town, toward the abandoned post office, and slowly shook her head. "If we run," she said quietly, "they win again." Walter looked devastated. "Eliza, these people destroyed lives for decades. They destroyed mine too." A painful silence followed. Then Eliza reached into her pocket and pulled out her mother's necklace. The silver reflected faintly beneath the falling snow. She tried to expose the truth alone. Eliza whispered, "That's why they silenced her." Her eyes lifted toward Walter. "But they can't silence all of us?" The next morning changed everything. At exactly 8 a.m., every local news station within 3 counties received anonymous packages. Inside each one, copies of Margaret Foster's recordings, financial documents from the hidden archive, missing foster care records, and a handwritten note. They buried the truth under the post office. Now, the whole country will see it. By noon, Maple Creek exploded into chaos. Police vehicles flooded the streets. Federal investigators arrived. News helicopters circled overhead. People who once mocked Eliza now stood outside the abandoned post office, staring in disbelief. The town's mayor disappeared before sunset. 2 officials were arrested. And hidden beneath decades of lies, the truth finally surfaced. But none of that became the story people remembered most. It was Eliza, the homeless orphan girl who uncovered everything. The girl nobody noticed. The girl they tried to erase. Over the following months, the abandoned post office transformed completely. The broken windows were repaired, the old lobby restored, the underground archive preserved. But Eliza refused to turn it into a museum about corruption. Instead, she turned it into something far more powerful, a place for lost people. The building became a national center dedicated to reconnecting separated families, recovering lost records, and helping former foster children search for their real histories. Thousands came, some searching for parents, some searching for children, some simply searching for answers. And every person who walked through those doors saw the same message painted carefully above the entrance. No one deserves to be forgotten. One snowy evening, nearly a year later, Eliza stood alone behind the front counter after closing time. The post office was quiet now, peaceful. Soft golden lights glowed against freshly painted walls, while stacks of newly delivered letters rested neatly beside her. Real letters, real connections, real second chances. Her eyes drifted toward the old photograph of her mother hanging near the office window. Margaret Foster. For years, Eliza believed losing her family destroyed her life. But now she understood something beautiful. Sometimes the truth finds its way back, even after decades buried in darkness. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Eliza opened the front door to find a young teenage girl standing nervously outside holding a small backpack. The girl looked cold, alone, terrified, and painfully familiar. "I heard," the girl said softly, fighting tears. "This is a place that helps people find where they belong." Eliza's eyes filled instantly. For a moment she saw herself, the frightened orphan, the forgotten child, the girl nobody came back for. But this time, the story would end differently. Eliza smiled gently and stepped aside, holding the door open. "You're home now," she whispered. As the snow continued falling outside, the warm light from the restored post office spilled softly into the darkness of Maple Creek. And for the first time in decades, nothing there felt abandoned anymore. Sometimes the places everyone abandons are the places hiding the most important truths. When Eliza Foster bought an abandoned post office with her last $214, people thought she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But inside that forgotten building, she discovered something far more valuable than money. The truth about her mother, the truth about her past, and the truth about herself. Eliza learned that being forgotten does not mean being worthless. Sometimes life breaks you apart only to guide you toward the place you were always meant to find. In the end, she didn't just uncover hidden letters. She found purpose, family, and a place where she finally belonged. Many people feel abandoned, lost, or invisible at some point in life. But your hardest season may become the beginning of something greater. Like Eliza. Sometimes the answers you've searched for your entire life appear when you least expect them. Never believe your past defines your future. Sometimes what feels like the end is actually the start of your transformation. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs hope today. And remember, no one deserves to be forgotten.